I am so glad to be with you today. You know what? There is nothing like being with you. You may say, you don't even see me. Yes, I do. You don't even hear me. Yes, I do. Because you comment back and I appreciate that. You call me back and I appreciate that. This is the best day you've ever had. You're like, huh? I didn't have a good day today. Something happened. The car broke down. Got into it with your boss. Got home, and there was issues with your children or your spouse or your mate. How can you dare say, Dr. Kimberly, that this is the best day that I've ever had? Well, you know what? Because I know all things work together for good if you love God and if you're called according to a purpose. If you're living according to the purpose on your life, it's still good. It's working together. So if it's not good, it's not the end, because it works together for a good. So if it's not a good, it's not the end yet. Keep holding on to see what the end is going to be. And I guarantee you that end is going to be good. You're listening to someone who didn't think an end was good. But I'm here to tell you, the end is good. So you can't give up. You have to see it all the way through. Who am I talking? I'm Dr. Kimberly Nelms Smarr. I'm a psychologist, a professor. I'm a spiritual teacher. I'm here with you every week. And most of all, I'm a real down home, if you want to say country, it's a real down home person who's gone through real issues. And I've asked myself, have you ever asked yourself, why didn't someone tell me I would go through this in my life? Why didn't someone tell me that I would experience these life issues by a certain age or by this time in my life? I would have gone. Would somebody please give a manual so when I go through these things in my life, I'll be more prepared? Well, that's what I'm here for. I want to help you with that manual. The manual that's going to help you with those tools to get through the issues of and in your life. Where did I get the manual from? God, the Spirit of the Lord. As I went through my particular issues in life, the Lord gave me answers. That's why I'm able to tell you the end is good. As long as I kept holding on, there were times when I fell off the wagon. There were times when I gave up, but then that strength was renewed within inside of me. And that manual, the tools to live in freedom every day, is what I'm going to give back to you. Now, that doesn't mean I know everything. Please don't misinterpret what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I'm sharing with you what I've been through, and I know what I've been through. You've been through it too, or you're going through it right now, and I'm here to help you just push you on through it. That's what I'm here to help you to do. So like I mentioned, I'm Dr. Kimberly. This is the Lifeline. See, life, L.I.F.E, stands for living in freedom every day. It is purposed. Before you were born, it was written in your personal book that you were to live in freedom every day. You are to have life abundantly. You're supposed to speak life from the power of your tongue. You're supposed to have life when you walk in the room. People should say, ooh, who is that walked in the room? Just brought some joy. That's you. You are the one that brought that joy in the room. So live in freedom every day. Every week I come to you and I deal with issues. Some of them we don't like dealing with. Whoo! Wasn't that unforgiveness one a real deep one? Woo-hoo. That was a good one. It was deep, but it was good. So we go through life's issues and we discuss those issues so you can have the answers. That's right. That's what it's all about. My husband and I, Pastor Maurice Smarr, we got together and we said we want to be used by the Lord, who has given a vision for us to speak life into you. And I'm hoping, I'm praying, I'm believing, because you're talking back to me through the comments. You're calling, you're texting, you're emailing, whatever form of communication you've been using. Thank you. Because you're saying how this lifeline has really been giving you life. Tell somebody else about it. Share it. Call somebody right now. Say, this is something you have to hear. Because tonight, ooh, we got a good one. This is the night I want you to take in like never before. I know people say that, but for real, like never before, because it's going to enhance your life. This is the moment. Tell whoever's in your room to either join you, or if they don't want to, tell them to give you about 20, 25 minutes, because you are about to reboot. You're going to shut everything down, everything that's been going on, that's been stressing you, depressing you, and all of that other stuff, and you're going to turn back on, and you're going to reboot. So tonight, we're dealing with a topic that I know you've been through. I know I've been through it. I'm just going to talk to Dr. Kimberly tonight. And if you want to join in, you just join in. How about that? Tonight, I'm going to break down a series over the next couple of weeks. We're going to deal with a series, What to Do When Temptation Happens. My God, today. Aren't there so many areas in our lives that we can be tempted? It can be through food. It can be through television. It can be through spending money. It could be through sex. It could be through drugs and alcohol. There are many ways that we can be tempted. And the key is, just because you're not tempted the way I'm tempted, don't condemn me. And just because I'm not tempted the way you're tempted, I'm not going to condemn you. We are in this together to work through temptation so we can get to the place where we'll be able to resist it. We'll be able to flee from it, or have the temptation removed from us, and we'll be living in freedom every day. So let me start. Let's talk about temptation. What is temptation? Maybe you know the answer, maybe not. But what is temptation? Temptation is a desire. It's that urge that we get. But the thing about it, it's a short-term urge for enjoyment. And what it happens is it prevents, it threatens, it prolongs our long-term goals. So it's a short-term urge. And it's an enjoyment. I'm not going to tell you that temptation is not enjoyable, because if it wasn't enjoyable, it wouldn't even tempt you. So it's a short-term urge that's preventing your long-term goals. What is temptation? Temptation is that immediate pleasure that we get, that urge to do something. And more than likely, that something is something we shouldn't be doing. Temptation is that immediate pleasure, that impulse that we get to do something. And more than often, and more than likely, that something is something that's not wise, not healthy, not good for us to live in freedom every day. Temptation is that thing or that someone that seduces us and pulls us away from the right path in our life. From the right path and journey in our life. Temptation is that desire to have something that you know you shouldn't have. It's the desire to have someone that you know you should avoid. What is temptation? That short-term urge of enjoyment that prevents the long-term goal in your life. So where does it come from? It comes from those voids that we have. Remember, we talked about that. When we're tempted, it's the result of a void that we have. Those fillers. Let's go there. Those fillers that we have, whether it's a relationship that we're trying to fill a gap, whether it's shopping, again, spending, whether it's drugs, alcohol. And now just when you think about drugs, it's not the person on the street or the person who's shooting up their arm. There's some people who are addicted and tempted by legal drugs, prescribed drugs. Temptation, where does it come from? From that void, that need, that unquenchable pleasure, that urge to be filled by sex, by men, by women, by both. Where does temptation come from? My mama calls it like this. It's the can't help it. I remember my mother saying it like that. It's the can't help it. It's like I just can't resist it. It's grabbing me. It's calling my name. I can't help it. Where does it come from? Temptation. Where does it come from? It comes from not being able to, I just can't get enough. Those are some of the things we say about temptation when we're being tempted. I just can't get enough of it. I just can't have enough of it. It's, again, that short-term urge of enjoyment, but it's preventing, it's threatening, it's prolonging your long-term goals. Where does temptation come from? That restlessness, that void again, that longing, that emptiness. So temptation comes to fill a gap that we have, to satisfy a temporary pleasure that we have. Where does it come from? It comes from excessive craving for something. Whether that something is success, whether that craving is food, whether that excessive craving is money, whether that strong desire for someone, for sex, for love, that drive of urge to be loved, tempted by being with somebody who's married. Oh, that short-term urge of enjoyment. There you go. But it's throwing you off from your long-term pleasure. There you go. Being tempted. Temptation, it'll have you, temptation will have you doing whatever is necessary so you can get what you want to get. Temptation will have you doing whatever possible so you can get it. Whatever your it is. Food, money, sex, somebody else that you shouldn't have. Whatever. Money, drugs, alcohol. That temptation will drive you to do whatever is necessary. If it means sneaking around the corner, if it means setting up a little one-night stand and you hoping nobody will find out about it, those temptations will grab you and cause you or tempt you to do whatever is necessary to get what you're trying to get. Where does temptation come from? I want to come out of the Word of God for those who need that revelation from the Word. Let me quote it to you then. Temptation comes from when you are drawn away by your own lust. I want to read this. James 1, that's in the New Testament, verses 13 and 14 says, "Let no one say when he is tempted," don't say this when you're tempted, "Oh, it was the Lord, he tempted me." For temptation does not originate from God, but it tells you where it comes from. Are we talking about that? Where does temptation come from? James 1:13 tells you where it comes from. It comes from our own flaws. It comes from our own flaws. Each one of us. This is where it comes from. When we are dragged away, when we are enticed and baited. Think about that. We are enticed and baited, just pulled in. It's a scheme. We fall for the okie doke of temptation. It drags us away from what we're supposed to do, our focus and our goal. It entices us with what is an urge of pleasure for the moment. It entices us and baits us to commit a sin by our own desire, our own worldly lust, our own worldly pleasures. That's where it comes from, not God tempting you. So don't blame it on the Lord. Don't blame it on spirit. Don't blame it on the devil. You're being tempted because you're drawn away by something that is a lust, a desire, a temporary pleasure. So where does it come from? I want to tell you two areas that temptation comes from. We're going to really break it down here. One, it comes from the lust or desire to please you, to please ourselves. It's self-pleasure. In the Old Testament, Genesis chapter 3, verses 1 through 5, you can read that. It's talking about the woman in the garden who was tempted. You should know the story. You probably already do. If not, read Genesis 3, verses 1 through 5. The woman in the garden, this was before her name was Eve. She was just called woman. In the garden, being tempted by the serpent. What happened? She was told what she needed to hear. She was told what she wanted to hear. Now, women, I'm just going to hit to it. Women, we are audio. We like to hear stuff. Sometimes hearing it gets us in a whole lot of trouble, being tempted and falling away by our own desires. Yes, just like woman, we like to hear things. Whether it's, "You sure are fine. You is a sexy thing." Or whether it's your intelligence is so enlightening. It just grasps me and it takes me to a higher level of dimension. So I don't care which kind of way it comes from. Talking in a woman's ear can give her a lead on into temptation. So women, beware. Don't be so gullible that you need to hear something, that you want to hear something, that it leads you and entices you and baits you by your own desire and your own lust for a temporary pleasure. Because when you wake up the next day, you're going to say, my goodness, do you mean I fell for that again? I fell for that again? So watch what you want to hear. Watch what you feel you need to hear. Because when it's spoken into your ear, it's not just into your ear, women or men, but I'm talking to the woman now. It's not just into your ear. It goes into your spirit. So when you're not even around that person that's such a temptation to you, when you're not around that person, you still can smell them. When you're not around that person, you still can hear their voice. When you're not around that person, you still have memories and your body still quivers. That's temptation. Enticing you and baiting you because of what you heard that went into your spirit. Now you're connected to someone or something that you have been baited into and tempted by. Women. And that's why when we hear things and it gets into our spirit, it's hard to shake that person. Whether it's a male or a female, it just gets hard to shake them. It's hard to get them out your mind. You smell them like I told you. When they're not around, you hear them. When they're not around, women. Where does temptation come from? We're drawn away by self-pleasure. Now I got on the women. Let me talk to the men. Men, where does your temptation come from? When you're drawn away by your own desire and lust to please yourself. As women are audio, men are visual. So men, you have to be careful of what you see and what you fall for. Because what you see ain't always what you get. What you see is not always what is. You know what? What does Lauryn Hill say? Guys, you know you got to watch out. Some girls are only about that thing. That's enough. I just felt like singing a little bit for you. But men, you got to watch out too, so you're not drawn away by your own desires and your own lust because your eyes got you into some trouble. And women, your ears got you into some trouble. So where does it come from? Pleasing our own self. Where else does temptation come from? Pleasing other people. Our desire, our lust, our temporary pleasure to please other people. Now, I told you how we please ourselves. But how to please other people is another way that we are tempted and where temptation comes from. People pleasers. Now, after the woman, remember we talked about her being tempted by the serpent, she goes to her husband, Adam, and tempts him. I don't know what she said. I don't know how she said it. I don't know what she looked like when she said it that tempted him. But whatever it was tempting enough for him to want to please her. So where does temptation come from? Other pleasures. When we want to please other people. When we're willing to do whatever it takes to keep that person. Even if you know whatever it takes is not good for you. We do whatever we need to do to be like somebody else. Even if you know trying to be like them is taken away from who God made you to be. So where does temptation come from? I just told you two main areas. The area of pleasing yourself and the area of trying to please other people. You better wake up and realize that you have been sent here with a purpose. You're on a journey. There's a plan destined for you. Don't allow temptation to pull you and entice you. Now, as I'm talking to you, I'm not talking to you as a condemner, as somebody who's beating you with a whip, somebody who's taking the Bible and saying you better live holy or else. No. I'm able to talk to you because I've been in the seat of temptation. I haven't always been like, let me give you the answers for how to live in freedom every day. Let me give you how to walk in holiness every day. I've been tempted. I have fallen short. I have yielded to my own desires. I have yielded to the point of wanting to please other people. That's why I'm able to talk to you. I'm not condemning you. I'm not browbeating you. I'm not sending you to hell. I'm not doing any of that. What I'm doing is giving you part one of what to do when temptation happens. And part one is recognizing temptation. So I'm trying to have your ears to open. I'm trying to have your eyes to open. I'm trying to have your spirit to open. So you can recognize the temptations that are pulling you away from your ultimate goal in this life's journey. So how do you know if you're being tempted? We talked about what temptation is. We talked about where it comes from. Now let's hit on it. How do you know if and when you're being tempted? 3 things I want to tell you how you know it. 1, when you start to question your actions or your pre-actions, when you say things like, should I really be doing this? But if anybody found out that I was doing this or even thinking this, should I really be doing that? More than likely, you're being tempted. More than likely, you falling to temptation, or more than likely, you right there on the verge about to fall to temptation. Number 1, when you start questioning your actions or your pre-actions. Number 2, how do you know if you're being tempted? When you begin to reason with yourself. When you say, surely I won't be doing nothing wrong. Surely it won't be that bad if I do it just one time. And let me tell you, that one time turned to 2, 3, 4, 5, 50 times. And before you know it, it has consumed you. You have changed your whole identity because of temptation. How do you know if you are being tempted? Number 3, when you start making excuses or justifying your actions. How do you do that? When you say, well, everybody got something, so just because I'm doing what I'm doing, I'm sure somebody else doing what they're doing. Everybody got something. This just happened to be my something. So 3 ways you know if you are being tempted. 1, you'll make excuses for your actions. You'll say everybody doing it. 2, you'll start questioning your action or your pre-action. Should I do this? Is this something I really need to be doing? 3, you'll begin to reason with yourself. You'll say, surely it won't be that bad. 3 ways you'll know if you're being tempted. So I told you what temptation is. I told you where it comes from. I told you how you know when you're being tempted. That was a lot just in his own self. I got a VIP after telling you all of that. VIP, very important point. Along with us going through this series of temptation, I want you to remember something. I said it earlier, but I want it to be a VIP for you. Don't condemn someone else of their temptation when you have a temptation of your own. Don't condemn somebody else of their temptation when you have a temptation of your own. Just because their temptation is not yours doesn't give you the right and the seat of judgment. Isn't that Psalm 1? You're sitting in the seat of the scornful. Who gives you that right? Just because their temptation is not your temptation. So don't condemn somebody else of their temptation when you have a temptation of your own, or you had a temptation of your own. Because every week we got those people. We get them. The ones that say, I've never been. So for those who have not been recently tempted, you have in some part of your life, since you were born, you were tempted to do something. So don't condemn someone else of their temptation when you have a temptation of your own. John chapter 8, that's the New Testament. There's a story. There's a woman. She was caught in the act of adultery, sleeping around. Sleeping with somebody who she wasn't supposed to sleep with. Sleeping with somebody who wasn't hers to be sleeping with in the beginning. So the law of Moses, what happened was they came to Jesus and they said, the law of Moses commanded that we can stone this woman for her actions. So what do you say about it, teacher? They were referring to Jesus when they said, teacher, teach us the answer. What do you say about it? Jesus took his time and then he said, well, he who is without sin, anyone among you, let him be the first to cast the stone that you're talking about. And you know what happened? One by one, they left because they realized they were not without their own sin or temptation. So VIP, don't condemn someone else of their temptation when you have a temptation of your own. So we dealt with part 1. What to do when temptation happens. Part 1 was recognizing temptation. What is your to-do list for this week? Now, like I told you, I do them too. I do it before I tell you to do it. I'll do it again now that I'm telling you to do it. And I do it after I tell you to do it because I have to live it out before I suggest it and give it to you. So what is your to-do list for what to do when temptation happens? I want you to read a scripture. I want you to read Matthew 6:9-13. And it is the prayer. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, and thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debtors. Oh, we talked about them in unforgiveness, as we forgive our debtors. And this is the part I want you to stress. And do not lead us into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thine is the kingdom, power, and the glory forever. Amen. So as you're doing this what to do list, I want you to focus on that part that says, and do not lead us into temptation, but deliver us from evil. And each week we're going to deal with that. Do not lead us into temptation, but deliver us from evil. After you read that, I want you to know in your heart, your soul, your spirit, and your mind that God has every need you have to fill every void you have so you won't fall over and over into that temptation. Again, I'm not condemning you. I come commissioning you to read the scripture, to know in your heart, in your mind, your soul, and your spirit that God has every need you have to fill every void you have. I love you and I speak upon you that your eyes will be open and that your ears will be open to recognize the temptations in your life. I love you and we're going to talk again on part 2. Until then, keep on living on top of the world.